Good morning, everyone. Awesome to see everyone. My name is Rami Banitsky. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a partner at Sapphire Ventures. And I'm joined here by Marty Marugel, who's Chief Innovation Officer at SAP North America. And on behalf of SAP, Sapphire, and our kind sponsors, a big welcome. This is our third annual CIO Summit. And over the course of the last couple of years, we sort of like gradually and over time have increased the number of participants as well as the agenda in terms of quality, just kind of like responding to feedback that we've been receiving from folks in terms of things that you wanted to hear. But as a design principle, we always wanted to keep it smaller, more intimate, facilitate conversations that have to do with innovation, have to do with CIOs, have to do with challenges that are unique to you. And not necessarily things that are what you want some of the vendors to hear about. So it's a nice balance between understanding the latest and greatest that the value has to offer, that some of the companies here have to offer, but really focus more on things that matter to you as a CIO. So why are we here today? I guess the first statement is being a CIO can be challenging. Certainly not when you spend a day at the Court of All. But otherwise, we obviously have a lot of conversations with CXOs, whether it's SAP, of course, and at Sapphire, we have pretty much a daily, weekly conversations with many of you, and we realize that it's a job that has a lot of challenges, and it has become really more complicated over the course of the last few years. Some examples that come to mind, you're expected to keep systems, legacy systems, running perpetually. And these are systems that were designed with a certain lifespan or a finite lifespan in that sense. Security, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. You're responsible for ensuring the security of your organization that has many more vulnerabilities that you can track. And that obviously is evolving and getting more and more complicated. You have to manage that kid in the candy store mentality that few of the line of businesses have. When it comes to shadow IT, and understand how to keep track of procurement and how to keep track of usage of technology solutions you may or may not know about. And at the end of the day, I think that one of the key differences is also now more than ever you have to drive at speeds of the business which you have never seen before, and it's exponentially increasing and getting faster and faster. So all these challenges are compounded just because of the cycle of business that is just getting faster and faster with the digital transformation of businesses over the course of the last few years. So there are some forces that obviously come to mind or come to play when we think about the contemporary CIO. I mentioned shadow IT. Is Netscope here, by the way, Sanjay? So one of our companies, Netscope, which is the leader in cloud security, ran an interesting survey, and that's something that they do with many of their clients. They actually asked a simple question of the CIO, which is, how many cloud assets do you believe you have? And then they actually ran an audit to compare the two. And on average, the typical enterprise runs about 1,000 cloud applications. And the interesting thing is when they audited the IT department, the response that came back was about an order of magnitude lower, around 100. So there's a big discrepancy between what we think we have and what we actually have in this brave new world of cloud. And I think that that has to do, I can look at myself and how I work. You go to a local Starbucks, you turn on the machine, you log into some Wi-Fi that may or may not be secure. You use Google Docs to work, you upload things to your personal Dropbox, and so you create a lot of vulnerabilities, you create a lot of exposure for the organization without even knowing it. And we have a few companies that actually are going to talk about it today. Netscope is one, Wandera is another, that actually look at this problem and ways to alleviate the concern for the CIO. The other thing that is interesting, and we're seeing it every day now, is the workforce is changing rapidly. And we keep talking about millennials, but millennials, it's frankly, the vast majority of employees now are millennials. And when I look at the work habits and the expectation of a typical millennial, it's very different than a Gen X such as myself. And it has to do with the fact that when you're getting into the workforce and you're already digitally native and you're multitasking and you're tax savvy, your expectations as far as what the enterprise need to provide are very, very different than someone who grew up in the, say, 90s as an employee and has very little expectations as far as the usability of systems. So it's rather different, and then obviously it contributes to different speeds in which they expect things to be available to them. The other interesting thing is that research shows that millennials, by the time that they turn 32, have changed about 4 jobs, which is twice as many as Gen Xers before them. And what it creates is a situation where you do not have the tribal knowledge, the institutional knowledge, kind of like accumulated and retained within the organization. So you as a CIO and obviously the CXOs need to figure out a way to maintain that institutional knowledge, knowing that there's just higher degree of transformation and transition in and out of the organization as you go. Marty.
I'm shocked. I thought you were a millennial. I you learn
Thank you.
every day.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about external forces. And the first one is security. And I don't think I have to say much about security. You all live this every day, and you realize how. There we go. Yeah, and you realize how much security has impacted the role of the CIO. And I think about SAP internally. Is Justin Solmani here yet? I don't think there he is. So Justin can talk a lot about, and he's actually on a panel this afternoon, about how we manage our own internal security. But we have, and you can keep me honest here, Justin, about 200 million spam messages a month. We have about 160,000, malware attacks a month. We deal with, a couple hundred incidents a month at least, right? So, I mean, just in terms of that role alone of security has expanded the role and obviously the responsibility. You see what happens to Equifax is a perfect example just in the last 60 days, right? So, I think that is, really one of the significant external forces, but there's others too, right? When you think about cloud. Yesterday, I was in the Valley talking to one of the high-tech companies and their CIO about cloud computing and kind of what their strategy is. And it was a really good discussion about, do you move cloud? Do you move on-prem? Do you do a hybrid approach? In this case, he was talking about they've kind of decided that the hybrid approach is best for them. Now, a week ago, I was in Boston talking to another client who said they're moving all into the cloud. And the thing is, there was a recent study by IDC, and they talked about how consistent is a company's strategy when it involves the cloud. And I think it said only 11% of the organizations really have organizations that have multiple cloud workloads, have a consistent best practice approach. So these are challenges that have presented an extraordinary, really, opportunity for the CIO moving forward, for the contemporary CIO.
But with that, obviously, come a lot of opportunities, and we want to talk about that a little bit because that's going to tie nicely into the agenda for the day. The interesting thing is that I think it was CIO Magazine that ran a survey and asked CIOs, what is the number one KPI? What is the number one thing that you're expected to deliver as far as your CEO goes? And the interesting thing was that it's now tied more than ever to revenue goals. And obviously, that's a transformation. That's a new thing, relatively speaking, because CIOs have not been responsible for top line and revenue in the past. And now, more and more, you're now part of the business. You're part of the core mission of the organization, which is the top line. And at that point, 91% of surveyed CIOs also talked about recently about the fact that they see their job as really tied to digital transformation, which is interesting. Because in 2010, when the same survey was ran, about 52% of them provided the same response. So obviously, there's a huge uptick in terms of what CIOs are reporting in terms of how they view their jobs. Again, responsible for revenue, responsible for digital transformation of the organization. This is really the core essence of your organizational viability. And the fact now that you're part of that core mission is phenomenal in terms of CIO and your relevance to the organization. And in that vein, 50% of CIOs report directly now to CEOs, to the CEOs of the organization. And again, I think that only a few years ago, the number was around 1/3, give or take. So obviously, again, a nice uptick, which demonstrates the significance of the CIO to the organization.
So today, I mean, when I look at this slide and I see all of the different logos with the leading companies in their respective industries, you know, it's really amazing. You have the Global 2000 in the room, representing something like 1.5 trillion in market cap, about 50 billion in R&D budgets, and about 30 billion in IT budgets. So significant representation in the room. And in addition, I see a lot of successful startups, right? And that's the beauty, right? Rami and I talk about this all the time. We love this event because it just brings the two so closely together. And you're going to hear the startups today talking about analytics, talking about cloud, talking about infrastructure, and talking about information security. So just four of the topics. But it's really a great event. And you know, it's an opportunity to network and share best practices. And clearly the feedback that we often get, right, is that the best part is about the networking. Yes, the keynotes, et cetera, are great, but it's really the networking and kind of sharing those experiences across multiple topics that really drive the value for the attendees.
For sure. Maybe a few words, obligatory chest pounding in terms of who we are as organizations. So start with SAP.
Yeah, so I'll start. So, I mean, most, if not everyone in the room knows SAP. I think what you may not know, though, is that 50% of our revenue now comes from the platform versus applications. We've always been known as an application company. But that platform represents opportunity. It represents opportunity for the startups, not just here in the room, not just at Sapphire, but also across the portfolio of startups around the world. It also represents opportunity for our independent software vendors and for our customers to build and create new applications. Ultimately, what that means is we accelerate the pace of innovation, which is what you're asking for.
And Sapphire Ventures, for those of you in the room who don't know us, we actually have an interesting lineage dating back to 1996 when we were part of SAP. We're known to be SAP Ventures for about 15 years. And then in 2011, we spun out and have become an independent firm. We're proud to say that we have about 700 plus, give or take, startups in our global network, given our investment strategy, which gives us a very broad aperture, so to speak, into innovation anywhere. So often we have conversations with CIOs about some topics that sometimes are considered to be long tail. And because we have access to so many companies, we can actually curate conversations that are unique and interesting. And also just in terms of what we do, since 2011, we had about 40 plus exits, which we're very proud of, between IPOs and M&As, which makes us a top 5 VC in the industry in terms of exits. And we're very fortunate and very proud of that.